Don't talk. That's all he said. Just 2 words, sharp, firm, and chilling. The room froze. The clatter of cutlery, the hum of voices, even the soft music from the Steakhouse speakers seemed to stop at once. Every pair of eyes turned toward the corner booth where a single dad, a veteran, sat with his little girl. Nobody expected that this quiet man, dressed in a faded flannel and worn boots, would be the one to change the fate of the night. By the time it was over, he hadn't just saved the town's police chief, he had reminded everyone in that steakhouse what real courage looks like. Ethan Miller wasn't the kind of man who drew attention. A single dad, raising his 8-year-old daughter Lily, he lived a simple life in the small town of Silver Ridge. He worked long hours at a mechanic's shop, never complained, and kept his circle small. People whispered about his past, his years as a decorated Army veteran, but Ethan never bragged. He didn't wear his medals. His only pride and joy was Lily, a curious little girl who loved asking questions about everything from the stars to how engines worked. On a Friday night, Ethan decided to do something special. After months of penny pinching, he took Lily to Ridgeway Steakhouse, a modest but warm place where most of the town gathered on weekends. It wasn't fancy, but to Lily, it felt like a castle. She bounced in her seat, swinging her legs, giggling when her dad teased her about eating a steak bigger than her head. For Ethan, those smiles were worth every sacrifice. Across the room, Police Chief Daniel Harper sat with 2 officers. Harper was respected, sometimes feared, but always trusted. He had kept Silver Ridge safe for 2 decades, standing tall against crime. Tonight, though, he wasn't wearing his badge of authority, just a tired man, sharing dinner with his team after a hard week. The atmosphere was light, comfortable, until Ethan noticed something off. 2 men entered quietly. Not locals. They moved differently, scanning the room with subtle precision. Their jackets looked bulky despite the warm night. Ethan's instincts, the instincts of a soldier, screamed at him. He saw the way one man's hand lingered inside his coat. The way their eyes locked, not on the menu, but on Harper. And then Ethan caught it, just a flicker. The steel glint of a weapon. His heartbeat slowed. The world narrowed. Years of combat training surged back like lightning in his veins. Without thinking, without hesitation, he whispered those 2 words, his voice carrying a weight that made everyone pause. Don't talk. Lily froze. Harper's fork clattered. The waitresses glanced nervously. The strangers hadn't noticed Ethan yet. But Ethan had noticed everything. Time stretched thin, every second heavy with danger. Ethan shifted his body just enough to shield Lily, sliding her under the table with a gentle but firm hand. Stay down, baby girl, he whispered, his eyes never leaving the threat. The men moved closer, their steps calculated. One reached into his jacket. Ethan knew the look, he'd seen it in war zones too many times. This wasn't random. This was an execution. Before panic could erupt, Ethan stood. Calm. Controlled. He looked straight at Chief Harper and gave the smallest nod. Harper, confused, froze, but he trusted the veteran's eyes. The first man drew a gun. Gasps filled the room, chairs scraped, someone screamed. But before the trigger could be pulled, Ethan was already moving. In one swift motion, he lunged, grabbed a steak knife from a nearby table, and disarmed the man with surgical precision. The gun clattered across the floor. The second attacker reached for his weapon, but Ethan was faster. Using his body as a shield, he pinned the first man down while kicking the second square in the chest. The impact sent him crashing into a table, dishes shattering around him. The restaurant was chaos now, people ducking, crying, rushing to the exits, but in the middle of it all, Ethan stood like an iron wall. His eyes burned with a soldier's focus, not for glory, not for pride, but for one reason, his daughter's safety. Chief Harper finally snapped into action, grabbing the fallen gun and aiming it with steady hands. Drop it, he shouted. The second attacker hesitated, rage boiling in his eyes, before Harper's officers tackled him to the ground. Silence fell, broken only by the ragged breaths of those who had just stared death in the face. Ethan let go of the first man, standing tall, his chest heaving. He glanced toward Lily, who peeked out from under the table with wide, tearful eyes. She saw her dad not just as her hero but as the protector of everyone in that room. Chief Harper approached slowly, his voice low. "Miller, you just saved my life." Ethan shook his head. "Just did what needed doing." He bent down, lifting Lily into his arms. "We should get home." But Harper wasn't finished. That night wasn't just about survival, it was the start of something bigger. Harper would make sure the town knew who Ethan really was, a man who never asked for recognition, but whose courage spoke louder than words. And for the first time in a long time, Ethan realized something: maybe his quiet life had a bigger purpose. Maybe his service wasn't over yet. Sparkle's closing message/inspiring note. In a world where people often look away, Ethan Miller didn't. He acted. Not for medals, not for praise, but for love, for duty, and for the kind of courage that never dies. And sometimes, the strongest words aren't long speeches. Sometimes, they're just two simple words. Don't talk.